Hello, I'm Father Robert Lauder. Welcome to another session of the Catholic Novel. Today we're dealing with one of the giants, Francois Mauriac, his novel, Viper's Tangle. He mentioned 3 novels that he wrote that were definitely Catholic novels, and this is one of them. Mauriac was really a distinguished writer. He actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Several years ago, I became friendly with the Jewish Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel. And I discovered that Elie Wiesel and Mauriac were close friends. And of course, Wiesel was Jewish. Mauriac was Catholic. And Mauriac was very influential in Wiesel becoming a writer. I suspect some of you read Wiesel's terrific novel about the Holocaust, Night. So that was an interesting relationship, and I learned a little bit about it. When Francois Mauriac began to write novels, he received a great deal of criticism that they were too sexually explicit. Now, attitudes towards sexuality change. And I'll give you 2 examples of that. When I was in college, I actually went to my confessor for permission to read Graham Greene's The End of the Affair because I heard it was all about sex. When I read it, even at the age of 19, 20, I didn't find it that explicit, and that was back in the 1950s. Now I look at it and I wonder what was all the fuss about. That's one example. Another example is this. A priest in the diocese back in the 1960s, showed an Italian film that ends with a gigantic orgy, and he showed it to teenage boys. And I remember thinking, what was he thinking of? Why would you show them that film? There's just too much sex in it. And he did get into a little bit of trouble. His superiors called him in, what were you thinking of, and so on. Now a friend of mine shows that film at St. John's University. Nobody reacts at all. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they were yawning, okay? Why? Because we've taken such giant steps either in the right direction or the wrong direction. I'm not saying things are getting better. I'm just saying things are getting very, very different. When Andrew Greeley wrote a couple of his novels, some Catholics, and maybe others, were shocked that he included depictions of sex in it. I only read one of Andy's novels, though I counted him as a friend, and I admired him enormously. I think he did an enormous amount for the church. I thought it was basically pretty harmless. I mean, I don't read bestsellers, but my guess is, and everything I hear, the stuff that Father Greeley put in was pretty tame compared to what others are writing. Now, Francois Mauriac apparently took the criticism seriously and did tone down his treatment of sexuality. And of course, there's nothing in Viper's Tangle that anybody would find in any way objectionable. Mauriac was accused of being a Jansenist. Now, the 2 quote-unquote heresies of Jansenism are, one, an extremely negative view of sexuality. So Graham Greene was also accused of that. I don't think there is a happily married couple in any Graham Greene novel. His treatment of sex is always in terms of adultery or fornication or breaking a vow and so on. I could be wrong about that, but I don't recall any depiction of a happily married couple. So Greene was accused of Jansenism. Now, Mauriac, as I said, changed, right? He no longer dealt so explicitly with sex. But the other criticism is this, that the heresy of Jansenism is that the Holy Spirit so overtakes the person that the person loses freedom. So the Jansenists would explain Augustine's conversion as the Holy Spirit taking over his will. And that has been condemned, okay? So Catholics believe that the Holy Spirit is everywhere, inspiring us, perhaps provoking us, trying to move us. But the Catholic doctrine is we never lose our freedom. Now, this is another example of the mystery of God. How can the Holy Spirit be totally involved and not force us to do what he wants us to do? We'll all find that. We might find that out when we get to heaven, okay? But I just want you to know the doctrine because the shadow of Jansenism does arise in this particular novel. Incidentally, parish priests who have seen many, many more people die than I have as a professor of philosophy, okay, tell me that they often see people who are very much afraid of death change suddenly. and actually welcome death with faith and with hope. And the parish priests who tell me that say it's as though the Holy Spirit takes over. Now, I'm not contradicting myself. Takes over doesn't mean removing the freedom from the person, but it does mean supporting them, inspiring them, encouraging them, and so on. Now, the main character in this novel is, his diary. And the viper's tangle is a great image for this, really great. So the image is, and he actually says this in the novel, it's as though there's a snake around his heart. Now, thank God I have never had a heart attack, but when I have spoken to people who have had heart attacks, they say the experience is very much that experience of, first of all, you can't breathe, but secondly, it's like someone's crushing your heart, squeezing it, and so on. Now, the viper's tangle, let's get more theological here. It's not that there's a snake around the main character's physical heart. It's that there's a snake around his soul. And for much of this novel, he is totally alienated from his wife, from his children, from everybody. His main interest seems to be money. And that part of the novel is really well written. I did not read the novel in French. I read the translation. But it reminded me what a great novel this is. This is a novel I used to use at St. John's University. If I ever give the course again, maybe I'll bring it back. But it's so well written, you really get a sense of what sin does to someone. That selfishness is ultimately self-destructive, okay? Now, having said that, there is a strange page that gives you some hint of the character's conversion. And this might be where it tends to be Jansenistic. I remember the first time I read Viper's Tangle, I think I reached the conversion, and then I looked back a couple of pages, sort of saying, how did this happen? I mean, this guy was about as far from opening himself to God as possible, and now here he is apparently becoming quite holy. So I understand the criticism. I would not say that Mauriac is a Jansenist, but I understand why people might think so. The impression that the Holy Spirit takes over in the sense that the person no longer is making free choices, okay? So here is a strange page. If you happen to have the same edition I have, it's page 114. Now, this is all from his diary, and he's now addressing his wife, whose name is Isa, okay? He's talking about himself, how he feels, okay, his experience of being alienated. He says, and when I feel my mind to be at its clearest, that the temptations of Christianity most torment me. So he's indicating that something is beginning to disturb the evil in him. Something is beginning to use the metaphor, untangle the viper. Okay, now here's how it goes on. It is then that I feel it impossible to deny that a way does exist to me which might lead me to your God. If I could reach the point of feeling satisfied with myself, I could fight this sense of pressure with more hope of success. If I could despise myself unreservedly, then the issue would be settled once and for all. But when a man is as hard as I am, when his heart, as in my case, has become dead wood, when he can inspire only hatred and create about himself nothing but a wasteland, then he has no defense against the onrush of hope. It's almost, I'm reading, he's saying, if I become totally desperate and totally sinful, then the Holy Spirit will move in. I wonder if you really understand what I'm getting at, Isa. Perhaps it is not for you, not for the army of the just, that your God came into the world, if come he did, but for us. You have never known me, have never realized the kind of man I am. Do I seem less horrible to you now that you have read these pages? You must surely see by this time that there does exist in me a secret string which perhaps can, he goes on to say, which perhaps can be touched by Christ. That's about as close as we get to that, okay? But he does convert. He does change. And it's so dramatic that his son doesn't believe it. His son believes he's lost his mind, okay? So his granddaughter, the novel ends with his granddaughter writing a letter to her uncle, who is the son of the man who had the viper around his soul, okay? So here's what she says. Don't be afraid, Uncle. I am not trying to make him out a saint. I agree with you that he was a terrible, even at times a dreadful man. That doesn't alter the fact that a great light shone on him those last days of his life, that it was he, and he alone, who at that moment took my face between his hands and entirely changed my way of looking at things. Doesn't it occur to you that your father might have been quite a different man if only we had been different? Don't accuse me of throwing stones at you. I know your good qualities, and I know the good qualities of others. The real misfortune for all of us was that he took us for exemplary Christians. Now, a common theme in Mauriac's novels is criticizing what he calls bourgeois Christianity. What is it? It's kind of middle-class Christianity, middle-class morality. You do the right thing, you show up dressed for church on Sunday, maybe you throw a little extra money into the collection, but you don't let Christianity really you don't let it get inside. You don't let it really change your life. It's being respectable. It's the bourgeois Christianity is going to church because everybody goes to church. It's the thing to do. Now, I think we all know enough about the world today to know that cannot survive. It is no longer true that everybody goes to church, okay? Now, let me give you two examples of others affecting us. She says, if we were different, he would have been different. Where I say Mass on Sunday, in that geographic area, there are thousands of Catholics who do not go to church, Mass on Sunday. And I tell the people, you know, the 500 or 600 of you who are here are a tremendous inspiration to me. You have freely come here, not because, I hope not because you think it's some kind of a sin, but because this means something to you. So your faith touches my faith. And I hope my homily touches your faith. So we are tied together in some mysterious way. We not only affect one another physically, we not only affect one another psychologically, but in some mysterious way we can affect one another spiritually. Think of Mother Teresa. Think of Pope St. John Paul II. They affected millions of people, inspired millions of people, okay? So at the end of the novel, the main character's granddaughter is saying, maybe we are partly to blame. Maybe the Christianity we were showing him just wasn't good enough. I think that's a very nice way for Mauriac to end the novel, and he gets in his usual criticism. Christianity is more demanding than being middle class. So a great writer, Mauriac, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. I think you will find Viper's Tangle a very provocative novel, a really deep novel.